We all have challenges we need to overcome. Some surface from expectations on the world of how we should perform versus the way we're naturally wired. Then there are those stories that we tell ourselves about how we have to please people to be liked, or to be perfect to be accepted, or to control the outcomes where we can feel safe. Then there are the stereotypes that we have no control over. Things such as creative people can't meet deadlines and they follow the beat of their own drum. We know introverted people have the reputation of being socially awkward. And data-driven people such as accountants, engineers, and financial analysts have no personal communication skills. Today's guest is on a mission to shine the spotlight on how to begin to overcome one of those images by helping clients find the secret to navigating the world of work. Today's guest has over 25 years in engineering consulting. Chris Stasiuk combines project management expertise with charismatic leadership to help engineers thrive. He started in the detailed engineering execution area and quickly advanced to managing complete projects and building lasting client relationships. He's reimagined his life as a founder of Corvium, where he coaches engineers on communication and power skills, helping them break through the hurdles they can't achieve on their own. He has a passion that every engineer deserves to have their voice heard and respected. So, Chris, that's a big challenge there. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me on the show, Lisa.
All right. So, Chris, you've had this long and successful career in engineering consulting. Was there a trigger or a tipping point that inspired you to transition into coaching, particularly focusing on engineers?
There was, but it's not the path that maybe I would have expected. Probably about 3.5 years ago, my consulting company was acquired by a larger firm. I tried to stick with it for quite a while, but I got to the point where there wasn't a good cultural and company fit. So I thought I would start my own engineering consulting firm. So I left the corporate gig and started down the path of creating Corvium as an industrial automation engineering consulting firm. Through the course of building some of my skill set, I enrolled in a coaching course that was actually targeted towards managers and supervisors on how they could take a coaching approach with their direct reports. Well, being a manager of myself, I wasn't sure that was quite the right course for me, but I'd signed up and I stuck with it. Probably by the second session, I realized that actually there was, it really ignited a passion in me for, and getting past I had a stereotype of what a coach was, life coach gurus, but starting to realize that when applied correctly with the right tools, it can really make a change in individuals. And so with that engineering background and seeing a lot of my peers' deficiencies, we'll call them deficiencies, and being a bit of an abnormal engineer, one with social skills, I thought this is an opportunity to start closing some of those gaps, changing the stereotype and enabling engineers to have a voice amongst non-engineers and really accelerate their careers and move out of the cubicle and into the boardrooms and the corner offices. So,
yeah. All right. So what I hear in that is there is a why there behind maybe an injustice you see. Could you unpack that a little bit more? What is it that engineers, that they have, but they're just not being able to give?
I think there is the stereotype. One of my favorite jokes is, how do you tell an extroverted engineer they look at your shoes when they're talking to you instead of their own? And that really, I've seen a lot of my peers. Some are really great to sit on their own in their cubicle because that is where they shine within their work. There's a subset that are really good consultants. They can interact with other people. And there's a group in the middle that maybe sometimes get stuck in the cubicle because they don't know how to speak persuasively. They're not great communicators. They have a bit of imposter syndrome, based on the fact oftentimes that they think they're supposed to know it all, but they don't. And so not being able to communicate those ideas or accepting the fact that they may need help often will hold them back and keep them from reaching that potential. I've seen it over 25 years. And I'm focused on engineers, but it happens all over the place. And I've found, I guess I'm at the age where I'm tired of watching untapped potential sit and be wasted. And so if I can take an active role, that's what I wanted to do. And I've seen the potential in my peers that they can. I've seen lots of them step into the arena and take on the bigger roles and work with multidisciplinary teams or non-engineers. And so I know it's possible. I've done it myself. So I figured that would be a pretty good mission to work to change the face of engineering.
Yes, that's great. And I love when people have these big dreams, big ideas, and are really, deciding that they want to go after them. So we know that people who are wired to be more verbal or more analytical, they just behave in certain ways. They just naturally fall into this. And engineers are often seen as very, technically brilliant, but they don't maybe have an equal level of communication or leadership skills. When you work with these type of clients, what's the biggest challenge that you see immediately in working with them? What is a hurdle that you have to overcome?
There's often a combination, but probably one of the biggest things I see is there are times where there's a lack of humility. I'd alluded to it before, where as the engineer, maybe you think you're supposed to know it all. And so you're not necessarily willing to ask for help or seek help or accept help when it's offered, because you're supposed to figure it out on your own. So breaking past that to help them understand that it turns them into a coachable engineer that wants to improve and recognizes their deficiencies, but that there's steps to be able to take to close that gap and improve. So, and then the flip side, it will often, that's sort of paired with that is a degree of imposter syndrome, where maybe they're pushed into a new role and now really they're supposed to know it all, but they don't. Whether they actually don't or they think they don't, and it becomes, it can become crippling in that new role. So humility and imposter syndrome sometimes go hand in hand. And it's a vicious circle where one won't allow the other one to be exposed. So.
Yeah. And I think a lot of times too, before maybe the thought of working with a coach, that they may not be aware that they need more humility. They may not be aware that what they are feeling is actually imposter syndrome. But, as I've spoken with other coaches in different interviews, I think the thing that we need to realize is coaching has shifted. Coaching doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you. If you look at the high performing athletes, they all have coaches. Executive coaching has taken on a new reputation. And so I think once people understand that coaching can be more about taking your best and making it better, is when you're, a little bit easier to break into that. Would you say that you align with that?
100%. It's actually one point that I've continuously played over in my head, that those high performers all have coaches, and they got there and stayed there because they're allowing others to help them and spot the deficiencies and gaps that they can't see themselves. And so I think that maybe there's also a perception that only high performers can get coaches, but I think coaching is becoming more accessible to people in maybe all walks of life, in mid-tier people, and getting a coach and allowing that help in can take you from that mid-tier up to a higher performer. Like you said, taking their best and making it better.
Yes, no, I think that's great to be able to just crack that ceiling of being able to move on. So, Chris, how do you go about helping clients bridge that gap to develop those soft skills that we all need to advance our careers?
It is another one of those, kind of getting past the ego. And the engineering world has a lot of gap analysis. And so by taking some of those principles and let's do a gap analysis on your skill set and being able to demonstrate that, yeah, you are technically great, but how do you convey that to particularly a non-engineer? Are you able to convey your ideas and pitch them and persuade non-engineers as an example? And being able to give some clear examples and demonstrations of how closing the gap in the skill set can actually move them forward and expose more opportunities. So it's again, the humility and getting past that ego, but being able to do it in a very objective way to say, here's your skill sets. Where do you rank yourself? Oh, you're a 4 on communication. That's great. Well, what if you were a 6 or 7? Look at the opportunities that may be available to you by broadening your communication base, for example.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I imagine with your extensive background in engineering consulting, you probably have some insights other coaches may not. What would be some common challenges engineers face that those who work around them, those who surround them, may not understand? Because as you said, these engineers, they're brilliant. They think they know it all, or, they believe that they have to know everything. But on the inside of the head of the engineer, what are things they're running up against?
I think sometimes they don't understand why others don't understand what they're communicating, believing it's the recipient's fault. I've clearly explained this technical issue to them, but because they've done it at such a high level, it may completely go over the head of the recipient. So I know that gap between, I guess it would be a knowledge gap or an understanding of that knowledge gap is a big thing. I think that coaching, while it's progressing and moving forward, is potentially being perceived as a bit too woo-woo and not science-based. Mm-hmm. So, being able to take a scientific, behavior science, analytical approach to dissecting the problems and putting together a solution is something that would definitely appeal to the engineering mind, rather than something considered a little more woo-woo. So I think those are for sure a couple of things going on in their minds of like, well, why doesn't Lisa understand what I've explained it clearly to her, and but she's a coach, so it's probably going to be some incense and breath work going on here. So I don't have time for that. I've got real work to do. So.
Yes, I have found that to be true, Chris. But when I talk about like what I do is based on, I use neuroscience principles, and we're going to rewire your neural path. Like when you can bring in the science and, the idea of woo-woo, I know there's someone who says woo-woo is actually true. It just has not been revealed yet, the scientific reasons behind it. So, but when we don't understand something, we want to, I almost say other it, like put it in, like, I don't get it. I haven't learned it thus far, and I don't see an immediate data-driven science research backing. And so because I haven't found that yet, I'm going to put it over here to the side. But when you look at really what works with people, it is our emotional connection. And, talk about not having a data-driven or science. Emotions are kind of out there on that realm too, aren't they?
Oh, 100%. Emotional intelligence is it's a bit of a unicorn. I think in our world of understanding it and appreciating it, for sure.
Yes. So, we're all out in the world. We're interacting with people who are introverts, extroverts, ambiverts, data-driven people, left brain people, right brain people. I know one of my marketing clients said, I'm left brain. I don't understand anything about marketing. And that's one of the beauties of our world and humanity is we all bring this diversity of talents and gifts. But we can often see, as you said, we can't see things in ourselves that others can see in us. So for our listeners, whether you are an engineer or whether you're not, there's people in your world who are wired this way. How could we go about recognizing a potential client who might need your help? And with that, I mean, like, what are the behaviors we could observe? What problems are visible that may indicate they could benefit from coaching?
I think one of the things I'd said early on this coaching journey was that I try to help engineers be less engineery. And I know that as soon as I say that, if I get a chuckle, people they've either worked with an engineer or they are an engineer, right? And so when you're working with someone or you love someone that is engineering, maybe a little socially awkward, maybe they're in not necessarily engineering, but a technical professional. Oftentimes this will, as you pointed out, data scientists and other nerds, which wear that badge with honor. They're maybe stuck. They're not great communicators. They're sort of spinning the wheels in their career and they can't figure out how to move forward or what's wrong or what they're doing. They're probably a really good candidate to have a conversation with someone that can objectively see from the outside. And maybe not just a family member or a close friend, but someone that's even a little further removed, to be able to, have a conversation with them and help them understand where those gaps are. So I think when you look and you say, I think my technical nerd is spinning, they're struggling, they're stuck in a rut, I know I started my career in a pretty good groove, but when I stuck in the groove too long, it became a rut. And it took some effort to get out of that. So when you see your nerd in a rut or struggling to move forward in their career, it might be an option for them to look at coaching.
Yes. And being very delicate on how you have that conversation, I would imagine would also be necessary.
Sometimes, yes. And that's where sometimes that the lack of emotional intelligence by the recipient may play to your favor, where you can say, you're not a great communicator, and they won't be as offended because they're like, and so, but, to be able to explain, if you were better, you might be able to, get that promotion or whatever. So, and I think that's an advantage that I've got when I can speak with fellow nerds, is that I understand. I've been there. I've done it for a quarter century. So I've been in the trenches with others that aren't great communicators, that are, technically brilliant, but can't really work well in a team or accept the help or, collaborate well. So.
Mm-hmm. So what I heard in that too is like painting the picture of what their life could look like if they were able. So there's that gap analysis again, right? There it is that plays into those skills. So Chris, I could hardly believe this, but yesterday, true story, all right? I don't tell anything but true stories, but anyway, I'm just going to throw that in there. Yesterday, I was on a call with a client in the construction industry, all right? So we were on a call with several high-level people within that organization as we're getting ready to work on some content for them. And one gentleman said, and I quote, I've got this quote written here, "Plans are written by engineers, but they never fully work. We have to rely on people in the field." And as soon as I heard that, I just thought that was just a gift that dropped in, because I knew I was going to be speaking with you today. So my question to that is, what type of relationship challenges have you seen between those in the field and the engineers that create these plans and projects? Do you maybe have a story or something you can tell us?
I actually have bookends on my career that cover that exactly. So very, very early in my university days, I was in a cooperative education program, which mixes work terms and education. And I worked with an electrician who hated engineers. So I asked John, as a curious young, almost engineer, why? Why do you hate engineers? And he explained something very similar. You engineers sit in your ivory towers and you create a design that will never work in the real world, and you won't listen to anyone that tells you otherwise. And so I've actually taken that through my career, and I will listen to my trades and my contractors, recognizing you folks do this every day for 20 years. You may have some insights on what does and does not work. And I've actually got the compliment where I've had electrical contractors tell me, you're an engineer I'd actually go for a beer with. So, I took that as a compliment.
Yes.
But then even more recently and I think this one comes down a little bit more to communication and ego, I was attending a quick wrap-up meeting where we had the trades, we had the engineers, the engineer was pontificating about all of the design and what happened and some of the testing to be done. The electrical foreman said, well, here's what I did, which it was something that was very common sense, made sense to me why he did it. And the engineer's tone was, well, of course you did that. And it closed off the conversation to the degree that my friendly electrical foreman, who was a big guy, 6'5", he looked at the engineer and he turned around and he just walked away and left the impromptu meeting. But the worst part was the engineer didn't notice because he kept talking and running the meeting as if nothing else had happened. So there was, I've learned on that communication front of you can check your ego at the door, because the folks that are doing this all the time know a thing or two about how things work in the real world, but also to be aware of how you're communicating to them, not be holier than thou, acknowledging various insights and diverse perspectives. So those were two funny bookend stories that I think I know the guy in the construction, sadly, and I can relate to him better than probably a lot of my peers.
Yeah. And, recently I've been doing some episodes on culture, and culture is really about, if you think about how that conversation went, like how that plays into the culture of the company, of where people don't feel safe, of where people's needs of being heard are not being met. Those are the little drips that come out of the faucet that build up that culture bucket of how we feel about going to work, about how we feel about our coworkers and the people that we must collaborate and coordinate with. So those are both really great stories, Chris. And I could see how that's going to influence how you work with your coaching clients. So if you could speak to any engineers listening to this episode, because we hope that this episode will make their way to them, what is it that you would like to say to them?
In it really succinctly, it's okay to ask for and accept help. You're probably not the smartest person in the world, and you probably don't know everything. It's possible you might, and that's okay. It's okay to ask for help because it's going to propel you forward. And best case or worst case scenario, it'll smooth off some rough edges. Best case scenario, it's going to propel you forward in your career like not just technical skills would do. When you team the technical skills with the abilities to lead, communicate, collaborate, understand people, it'll turn you into a rock star.
Yes. And I believe a lot of people think that being a leader means you have to know all the answers. But in actuality, when you admit you don't know everything, then it does make you more relatable.
Very much.
Yeah, it really does. So, Chris, I know you've worked really hard on a free resource for people who may be in this situation. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
So what I did, I thought, what are one of the biggest keys to help engineers and the best approach to get them? And so I built 7 critical communication skills to advance your engineering career. So it is a checklist that covers things like active listening and presentation and feedback. And it's available through my website. It's free to download. And I think it's a great tool to help the data-driven analytical mindset to be able to tick through the boxes and understand, yes, these are the 3 things that I need to keep in mind when I'm having a conversation, to be actively listening. So I should be looking at your eyes instead of your shoes.
All right. Really great tips and points on that. So you mentioned your website. Do you want to tell us that and also how people could reach out to you?
Oh, for sure. So my website is Corvium. It's spelled CORVIOM.com. And it's got details, it's got articles, it's got some background on me. And then I'm quite active on LinkedIn on my personal profile. So, and it's just LinkedIn, Chris Stasiuk. So you can find me there.
Yes, you are. I follow you on LinkedIn and you do a really good job on there. So, Chris, thank you so much for being with us today. I know this is a group of people who can really benefit from your assistance, and I hope that this show makes it to their ears.
Thank you very much for having me, Lisa. It was a great talking with you.
All right. Thanks so much. So for you listeners, my big takeaway is that Chris is another example of someone who made the choice to break free from the expectations of riding his career into the sunset, doing what he always did. He saw a challenge. He decided to do something about it. And I want to encourage you that you can do that too. If you're not sure where to start or how to take your first steps, I have a solution for you. Check out the show notes because I have this new Reimagine You quiz that will tell you what's driving the next version of you. And there are 4 different methods that you may follow. And when you find out your type, if you want to know more, you can certainly get this guide. It's a really robust guide that'll give you some activities that you can do to be able to take your first steps. So again, thank you for joining me today. If you are enjoying this show, I would really love it if you would subscribe to the show, either on your favorite podcast player or YouTube. It's a way other people can find the show. And please feel free to share this episode with others. So until next time, go chase your passion. It will reveal your purpose and allow you to live a life of so much more on the way to that next version of you, your legendary self. We'll see you next week. Thank you.